Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have another episode in our Spoiler Spotlight series in which I talk about, well, spoilers and tell you what my thoughts are on them. But before that, just a quick reminder to please click subscribe if you enjoy these videos. We're getting close to 1,000 subscribers and it means the world to me. Much appreciated. And today we are going to be talking about Urabrask. This is my favorite Praetor and one that I feel has been pretty hard done by so far in his previous two incarnations. And this time we have a pretty strong card. This is what it does. For 2 colorless and 2 red, we have a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor 4/4 with first strike. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Urabrask deals 1 damage to target opponent and add red. And then red, exile Urabrask, then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery and only if you've cast 3 or more instant or sorcery spells this turn. And then on the other side is the Great Work, a saga with 3 chapters, and the first chapter says the Great Work deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. The second chapter creates 3 treasure tokens, and the third chapter says until end of turn you may cast instant and sorcery spells from any graveyard. If a spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead, exile the Great Work, then return it to the battlefield. So the first time I read this card, there was actually a few little details I missed. It's a very complicated card, as you can imagine, seeing as all of these sagas are fairly complicated, and this one is very strong on the front. So I must admit I'm a little disappointed that it is a Spellslinger card, because I don't always like Spellslinger decks that much, and I feel like all the other Praetors have more generically good uses. This one fits in a very narrow deck, although it will be incredibly powerful and close to an auto-include in any Spellslinger deck, I think. So anyway, it wants you to be playing a bunch of cheap instants or sorceries, because you're going to get to deal 1 damage every time you do so and add mana, so you can kind of chain multiple of them together, all whilst you are pinging one opponent. Unfortunately, it's not each opponent, it's only one, so that does make it quite a bit worse. And I think the wording in general on Urabrask is a little bit on the weak side. Obviously the ability is very powerful because adding the mana is the main thing. However, the pinging could have been fine if it went to each opponent, I think. Anyway, Urabrask has the cheapest flip cost by only costing 1 red, but the drawback is that you need to have cast 3 instants or sorceries that turn. It should be fairly achievable, but you will be required to build your deck around him quite a bit if you want to flip him reliably. Once he flips, the first mode is pretty strong, and this is one of the parts that I read wrong. It actually says deal 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. I thought it was each opponent and each creature they control. This makes it quite a bit weaker and also a little bit awkward, because it means you're going to have to target somebody with this, and therefore you're going to be drawing that player's hatred probably for the rest of the game, because you've just wiped their board and they're probably going to remember that. Still, it is undoubtedly a very powerful effect and can buy you a bunch of time, which is something that you definitely need in Spellslinger decks a lot of the time. The second mode is probably the weakest mode out of any of these Praetors, and I'm pretty disappointed there's such a generic effect, although after reading the card again I can see how it works with the third chapter. Getting 3 treasure tokens is obviously fine, it's pretty decent, and this is a very cheap Praetor. However, it feels a little bit lackluster when you compare it to some of the other nonsense and the other Praetors are doing, like Elishnorn is giving +1/+1 to your team and double strike. That's just a lot better than this. But the third chapter is where it's at. This is a really cool part of the card, and I only realized when I read it a couple of times that you can actually cast instant or sorcery spells from any graveyard. So you can steal your opponent's stuff with this card, which is really sweet. That gives you a ton of flexibility. However, it doesn't say that you can use mana as if it were mana of any color, and that is where the second chapter comes in. That's why you're getting a bunch of treasures. In any case, you're probably mostly going to be casting stuff from your own graveyard, although it is really cool that you get to cast stuff from your opponent's graveyard. However, the really cool thing is that as soon as this chapter happens, it's going to flip back to the front side. So you're going to be able to chain him back to the flip side again very quickly, but you might not even want to, because you're going to be able to get 1 mana for every spell you cast that turn again. That's gonna quickly get out of hand, and it might allow you to win the game on the spot if you ever get to chapter 3. You could also just play it for value and use those treasure tokens to cast some stuff from your opponent's graveyard, which is really nice as well. And that's why I think this card is going to be very good in a deck that generates a bunch of treasures. So something like Unexpected Windfall or Big Score are both going to be really obvious includes that are going to be very good, and red does have quite a few ways to make tokens. Something like Brass's Bounty is obviously going to be fantastic as well, although that is a bit on the expensive side for this, what this deck wants to realistically be doing. In any case, these are all going to work really well. This is also best friends with with something like Burgi, God of Storytelling. It's also going to be very good with Stormkiln Artist, which is already an awesome card by itself, but it gets even better when you have an additional effect like this. It's just going to mean that every instant or sorcery you cast is going to refund you 2 mana, which is absolutely nuts. So obviously you're also going to want a lot of cheap cantrips in this kind of deck. I think it's very good in something like Zada, in something like Rionia. In those kind of decks it can be really good, or it can just be really good in any deck that's trying to burn out the opponent with spells. However, usually those are red-blue decks, and this is a mono-red one, so it might be interesting to see how that works out. So in my opinion, this is actually going to be better in the 99 rather than as your commander, but either way, I think it's a very strong card that is going to certainly hold value, but I'm a little bit disappointed that as probably the last Urabrask that we're going to get, this was basically the last chance to make a really powerful, generically good Urabrask, and we kind of didn't quite get there. We got something very powerful, but very niche. So there you have it. Those have been my thoughts on this new spoiler. What do you think about this card? Please let me know in the comment section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care. Woo!